Hey guys, this is Solution Podfic, and today we're going to be reading Who's on Suave. This is Chapter 15. This is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. It was the opposite way for Billy, and how his eyes collapsed around him. Well, that sounded a little bit dramatic. Not that most of his life wasn't dramatic. Theater seemed to be an essential component of being either a superhero or a supervillain. No, Billy meant it in a literal way. His unwilling reveal was the product of a whole lot of noise all at once, and then a whole lot of silence right after. He wasn't making any sense, was he? Well, it made perfect sense to Billy, but literally any of those words in that conjunction would only confuse his poor co-workers, and hopefully somehow, after all of this, friends further. Better to figure it out in his own head so he could lay out the facts that much easier. Billy and his father had just finished waving off Con and Ellie, who after brunch had to leave for Con's first appointment with frostbite. Because no one was sure if Con was vaccinated, needed to be vaccinated, could develop more powers as time progresses, could lose powers as time progresses, etc. Danny and Billy had been about to go home when Billy's comm rang. The League needed help with a series of magical Hydra-esque creatures who just wouldn't stay down. And who better to help with the magical problem than Captain Marvel? And it had been working, really well actually. Apparently all that it took to keep the animated army of animalistic old pottery shards from multiplying when they'd been broken had been to, zap them. The discovery that magic was the most important factor, his colleagues had turned to herding the monsters toward him and Zatanna. Most towards him, really. If there was one thing that godlike powers and nigh unlimited magic was good for, it was wanton destruction. He was tearing through them, clay shattering to dust as his lightning branched out and struck them, leaving behind black Littenbergs, which wasn't strictly scientifically possible, but it was magic lightning on magic clay, so who knew? It was going just fine up until the charred, shattered remains rattled and swirled into a ramshackle kaiju. There was someone, a wizard or a sorcerer, just some guy with a spellbook, shouting out his evil monologue, but Marvel hadn't been listening. The way it fell, Zatanna, Batman, and Martian Manhunter went to fight the evil magic dude, while Superman and Flash went with Marvel to fight the giant monster. It hadn't been going well. Any time Superman or Flash got a hit in, it healed just as quickly. But whatever effectiveness Marvel's lightning had, it had waned in strength, like a reparation for its earlier power. They'd hoped that once the dollar store wizard was taken down, the magic would collapse without the structure of a caster. Captain Marvel, along with Superman, had focused on trying to pin the monster and keep it from destroying the buildings around it, while Flash almost simultaneously served as a civilian evacuation and the occasional distraction from the bargain bin sorcerer. Billy bet Danny would have lots of creative names to share with him later if Billy asked. The porcelain creature did not collapse when its creator went down. In fact, it only seemed to be getting stronger. They weren't panicking, not yet, but the potential for it was there. Billy hadn't thought about it, not really. His thoughts, and maybe a little bit of Solomon and Zeus's, about lightning, and how even when the monster's part cracked apart and came back together, the scorch marks stayed flinted past at Flash's level speeds. He didn't stop to consider what he was doing. Hesitation on the battlefield was a terrible idea, and Captain Marvel was more impulse than power than thought and skill, like Batman. So with power flowing through Captain Marvel and the wizard's name on his lips, Billy Batson came back into the world. At the same time, the clay monster shattered into a dust of pebble-sized flecks. Unfortunately, when Billy's inhaled to call the wizard's name again before he, hit the ground, he got a lungful of magic monster dust. Hard to say anything when you're attempting to cough out at least half your lung. Martian Manhunter caught Billy as he emerged from the slowly drifting dust in freefall, and brought him down to the ground. They knew, they all had to know. They had to have seen Billy, and must be coming to their own conclusions, maybe even the right ones. The battlefield was silent in the wake of Billy's cacophonous lightning. He hoped it wasn't so loud that it hurt the others. He'd never really transformed around other people besides Danny, but Danny was an outlier in most things, so he didn't count. Billy stood on a pile of shattered and blackened pottery, feeling it crunch and grind under his sneakers, trying not to think too deeply on the weight of the stairs around him. "Captain Marvel, are you all right?" Zatanna asked, picking her way around the craters of piles of debris with a slight limp. Billy coughed, choking on the dry dust he'd inhaled. Blah. His mouth tasted awful. He shakily held up a thumbs up instead. Your Cap?" Flash asked shakily, staring at Billy. Billy breathed deeply to get his breath under control and tried to think as quickly as he could. Lights swirled in his head, half-formed planes of energy-saving forms, latent curses, and simply refusing to give any answers inundated his brain. But all of it just left a bad taste in his mouth, beyond the clay that was. He could lie, he could say a lot of things. Batman would figure it out, of course, but he could fool the others, maybe. But he didn't want to. He didn't want to lie to them any more than he already had. There was a difference between misdirection and omission, and straight up lying to their faces. He didn't want to lie any more than he already had. It felt bad. And he was tired of it. He always thought he'd be caught out one day. Either he'd say the wrong thing, or Batman would look too close, or like now, he'd sacrifice his secret identity to save the day. Because people always came before secrets. So Billy straightened up and cleared his throat, swelling back overwhelmed tears of anxiety, and smiled. "Yeah, Flash, it's me." Silence. Dead silence. Billy ignored it. "Is everyone alright? No injuries? Zatanna?" Zatanna started lightly. "Rolled my ankle a little, but I'll be fine." Billy scrunched his nose. "Heals, Zatanna? Why?" "It's for the aesthetic," she teased, smiling at their familiar argument. "Well, maybe the aesthetic's stupid," Billy teased back. "Anyone else hurt?" "No," Batman said. He stared at Billy. Billy stared back. "How old are you?" "As of today, 13. "Happy birthday," Marcia Manhunter said politely from where he stood at Billy's side. Billy appreciated it. "Thank you. Now," Billy turned back to the rest of his hopefully still co-workers, hopefully still friends. "I know you have a lot of questions, but we still have a job to do right now. Can we all agree on that?" There was a pause as people glanced at each other before Batman nodded decisively. "Marvel, Zatanna work together to gather and contain any latent magical artifacts, as well as the Zephy Zandergeist." Was that the magic guy's name? Wild. "Superman, start moving debris. Martian Manhunter, assist him with anyone that's buried. Flash, medevac. I'll liaison with the police and get a perimeter set up." Batman spun on his heel, cape flaring dramatically behind him as they walked away. Billy always found it impressive and vaguely endearing that Batman was always so confident that people would listen to him. Billy almost wished he had that decisiveness, but if he did, he wouldn't be him. He asked and casualed and requested, but barely ever commanded. It didn't feel right. He had all this power, godlike and eternal, with the authority of an inherited mantle. It'd be so easy to get people to listen to him, to obey him. Just because they were scared of his power, and Billy didn't want to be that person. He could never let himself be that person. Allow Captain Marvel to be corrupted by his power. He wasn't a god. He was more than the champion of magic. He was Billy Batson. And one of the most important things about him was his heart. He wouldn't lose that. He refused. Even if this went awfully, if the Justice League kicked him out and he lost all of his friends he'd made, he would continue being a hero. He'd be Captain Marvel because that wasn't something he could stop being. He'd continue to do good and good would follow. After all, he wasn't alone. Zatanna and Constantine would help if he asked. They'd already known about his age, and he had his dad, and Sam, and Tucker, and Jason, and Ellie, and Con. They wouldn't abandon him. They cared for him, and he cared for them too. No matter what, Billy wasn't alone in this. No matter what. Alright guys, and that's the end of chapter 15 of Who's On Now by Leah Bizwavi. I hope you guys liked it, and I'll see you next chapter.